So before we get into this, a quick note. The World Cup is over and what a tournament it was. I have had a soft spot for Australian cricket for as long as I remember. And growing up, I tried to copy the batting styles of Ricky Ponting and Glenn Maxwell. And in 6th or 7th standard, even I covered my notebooks with cricket labels and photos. So seeing this Australian side lift another trophy felt genuinely special, and the way they kept finding different ways to win is exactly why this team is so fascinating to study. And I took a few days away after the final to enjoy the moment and reflect on the tournament. So this analysis is a little bit later than usual. Thanks for being patient, but this chase is still absolutely worth breaking down. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. India needed one thing at Lords, win and go through to the semis. And lose, it's over. So they batted first. Harmanpreet Kaur dragged them to 170, the highest score India have ever put up against Australia in a Women's T20 World Cup. On paper, that's that's a proper total. Australia chased it down with an over to spare. Not sweating, not a last ball thriller, so comfortable. So here's the question I actually wanted to answer today. How does a team chase down a target like that without it ever really feeling close? Because if you just watch the scoreboard, you'd think Australia just batted better. If you watch the game the way a player does, you'll see it's actually a story about two specific bowlers and one very specific patch of grass at Lords. So here's the quick context because it changes how you watch everything that follows. So South Africa had already won their game earlier that day. That result meant only one thing for India: beat Australia or go home. Australia, on the other hand, had already topped their group. They had a semi final locked in against West Indies, regardless of this result. So think about what that does to both teams. India playing with their season on the line. So Australia are playing with nothing to lose except bragging rights over their biggest rival. Remember 2025 ODI World Cup? So that's not a small psychological gap, and you'll see how it shows up later in how each team handles pressure in the last 6 overs. So let's give India their due here because the first 6 overs were genuinely best of the tournament. Smriti Mandana and Shefali Verma didn't lose a single wicket in the power play. 43 without loss. That doesn't sound dramatic, but here's the stat that makes it land. That's only the second time since 2023 that Australia have failed to take a power play wicket against India. Mandana played calm, low risk role, clipping the ball off her pads for boundaries, not forcing anything. But Shefali Verma did the opposite. She picked up Ashleigh Gardner, her matchup, and went after her twice. A 4 and a 6 in 1 over, and then a 6 and a 4 a few hours later. And here's the interesting bit from Australia's side. Their captain, Sophie Molineux, didn't panic. She held herself back from bowling, didn't bring herself into the attack until well into the innings, even while Shefali was cutting losses against her own bowlers. That's a team trusting their plan over the scoreboard pressure. It paid off in one ball. Molyneux finally comes onto ball, and the first ball she turns one back into Shefali and knocks the off stump over, just like that. The 66 run opening stand is gone. Shefali, who would have just been smashing Gardner around, is out to the very bowler who waited it out. So this is basically the philosophy Molyneux talked about after the game. Her point was even if you don't strike early, you hold your nerve because in this format things change fast. That's exactly what happened here. 1 over, 1 wicket, momentum totally flipped. Then India hand Australia a second gift almost straight after. Jemima Rodriguez plays a reverse sweep and is still watching where the ball went. When Mandana, who had already set off for a run, calls for one, Rodriguez doesn't respond in time. Mandana's too far down the pitch to get back. Run out for 38, 2 wickets in the spaces of a few overs. One from the bowler doing exactly what she planned to do, and one from a split second miscommunication, and suddenly India, who are cruising or rebuilding. Now, here's the bait people tend to forget because the chase looks so smooth by the end. Australia's start was actually shaky. Georgia Wall hits a boundary of the very first ball of the chase and is out the very next ball by LBW. Australia are one down before the first overs even finished. Phoebe Litchfield doesn't let that rattle her. She goes after the bowling early and gets Australia to 23 of 1 inside 2 overs. But then India's spinners tighten the screws. Sree, Charani and Shefali Verma especially. Litchfield and Beth Mooney switches grease completely. No more forcing it, just strike rotation once and for twos, refusing to give India a second wicket. And that partnership is worth of 50 runs, and by end of the power play, Australia are 49 for 1. Then it unravels a little. Litchfield top edges a ball of Charani and gets away with it. It lands safe, but the very next ball she goes again and this time picks out by Mandana at long on, gone for 24. A few overs later, Moni tries to break free against Deepti Sharma, mistimes a slog sweep, and it's Radha Yadav takes the catch in the deep. 22 of 20 balls, and Australia are suddenly 3 down for 85. At that point, if you are India, you genuinely believe you're back in this. So this is the real story of the match, and it's the part that only shows if you're tracking the game ball by ball instead of just watching the scoreboard. Once Perry and Gardner come together at third down, India actually rotated the bowlers well for a stretch. Radha, then Shifali, then Radha again, then Deepti Sharma, and then Charani. Nothing's going for runs yet, but here's what Perry and Gardner are doing quietly the whole time. They are taking notes on exactly who is giving them room and exactly which side of the ground is shorter. And the two names that come up again and again, Radha Yadav and Sri Charani. Those two just kept straying onto the bats and outside of over after over. And Perry and Gardner picked that apart, deliberately going after those two specifically rather than attacking everyone equally. So watch what happens. Radha comes back for a second over and gets taken for two boundaries by Gardner in a single over. A 4 and a 6 that over alone drops the equation from something India could still dream about to something Australia could cruise through. A few overs later, Charani gets the same treatment from Gardner. Gardner picks her out again by the time you you add it up to the middle overs of this chase, roughly the 13th to 18th, or basically Australia scoring at a will of exactly those two bowlers. And it's not random power hitting. This is why Molineux comment after the match matters so much. She specifically pointed to the shorter boundary down the slope at Lords as something Australia had clocked and used on purpose. Two of the most experienced players on that Australian team looked at the ground, looked at who was bowling where, and made a very deliberate call. This side, these bowlers right now. Harmanpreet actually tried to back the partnership by throwing the ball to Shafali Verma not once but twice, in the 11th over and again in the 15th over. Both times, Perry and Gardner just kept scoring. It wasn't a Hail Mary move, just almost worked, but India tried it, but it didn't work the first time and they went back to it anyway. Australia get home of 172 for 4 and Perry with 56, Gardner unbeaten on 53. Australia through as group winners. India for the second tournament running out at the group stage. So when people say Australia chased so comfortably, what actually happened underneath that particular sentence is this. Two batters spotted exactly which bowlers were leaking runs and exactly which side of the ground would punish them for it. And they kept doing that for just 6 overs straight. That's not luck, that's two senior players reading a real game in real time and making the same call independently at the same moment. That's the difference between a good total and a winning one. So, if you enjoy this kind of tactical breakdown, looking what's happening actually beneath the scoreboard, follow 11 plus 1, and there's a lot more to unpack from this World Cup. Hey, I'm Chamyukta, and this is 11 plus 1. If you love women's cricket and want to understand what really decides matches, you're in the right place.